Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. This is the November 7th, 2023 meeting of the Heritage Kitchener Committee. Before we start, we had some new members here, but I don't know if they've shown up yet. We have Tyler Marshall. No, hopefully he'll show up later. And we have a student planner, Riyata Chowdhury. I'm not sure if she is here either. Not.
Hi, Chair. She's working at her desk upstairs. We're going to call her down for her item.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we can start with the disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. If there are any conflicts of interest in committee members. Seeing none, we can proceed to item number 1. 4.1 is the Heritage Permit Application HPA 2023 V023 1115 Dune Village Road, the replacement of 14 wood windows with double hung windows, DSD 2023447. Victoria Groen will provide a brief presentation and an overview for this application, and I ask the members to hold questions of staff until the applicant speaks to the application. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. The Development Services Department is in receipt of a heritage permit application for the property municipally addressed as 1115 Dune Village Road. The property is located on the south side of Dune Village Road between Tilt Drive and Oregon Drive within the Upper Dune Heritage Conservation District. This is a Group A property, meaning that it is of high importance and considered to be a historic building within the district. The Heritage Permit application proposes to replace 14 existing wood windows with double-hung wood windows. The current condition of the windows is poor as they have deteriorated over time. The wood is rotting, mold is showing, and some of the windows have been painted shut and are inoperable. The replacement windows will match the existing in terms of material, size, and profile. The new windows will be more operable and energy efficient. There are no adverse impacts to the house, the streetscape, or the Upper Dune Heritage Conservation District as a result of this proposal. And based on the merits of the application, Heritage Planning staff is recommending approval of the Heritage Permit application. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the applicant, Barbara Berry, is also here. I don't know if you want to say anything or just like to answer questions. Great. Do the members have any questions for the applicant? Do the committee members have any questions for staff? Do we have any items for other discussion? Seeing none, would someone like to make a recommendation? Blue Bullet. To accept? Okay, thank you. Right, if this application receives unanimous consent from the committee, it will proceed under delegated approval authority following the committee meeting. Otherwise, it will proceed to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report reads that pursuant to Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2023 V023 be approved to permit the replacement of 14 wood windows with double-hung wood windows on the property municipally addressed as 1115 Dune Village Road in accordance with the supplementary information submitted with the application. All those in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous, and this can be processed under delegated approval authority. Thank you. Item 4.2, Notice of Intention to Designate 149-151 Ontario Street North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023478. Victoria Groen will provide a brief presentation and overview of this site. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item on the agenda is the Notice of Intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 149 to 151 Ontario Street North. The subject property is located on the east side of Ontario Street North between Weber Street West and Duke Street West. The property is currently listed on the city's municipal heritage register. A site plan application was first received by planning staff in 2019. At the time, the proposal was for a 17-story mixed-use building. The Heritage Kitchener Committee at the time reviewed the proposal and supporting heritage impact assessment and was generally supportive of the retention of the existing building as part of the redevelopment proposal. The property received, the proposal received conditional approval in 2020. The property was sold to new owners in 2021 and the proposal was modified. A revised heritage impact assessment was reviewed by the Heritage Kitchener Committee at its February 7th, 2023 meeting. A site plan application has been received and conditionally approved for the construction of a 27-story mixed-use building on the site. The submission and approval of a heritage impact assessment and conservation plan was made a condition of the approval of the site plan application, and the designation of the existing building has also been made a condition. At this time, the city is pursuing the designation of 149 to 151 Ontario Street North through the Notice of Intention to Designate process. Should council choose to give its notice to designate, the property owner will be required to submit heritage permit applications for any demolitions, alterations, or new construction on the site, and the Heritage Kitchener Committee will be provided opportunity to review and comment on such future applications. The Heritage Impact Assessment prepared for this property identifies that 2 out of the 9 criteria for designation are met. The property has design physical value as it is an early example of a late 19th century semi-detached vernacular brick building with both Italianate and modest Georgian influences. And the property has historical associative value because it is the last remaining example of a residential building in this section of Ontario Street North and is an example of a working class residence. Based on the evaluation of the property, Heritage Planning staff recommend pursuance of designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I note say that we have Rima Masri, Masri O Architects, and Chris Uchiyama, LHC Heritage, are in attendance to respond to any questions from the committee. They are not here. Okay. Do any of the committee members have questions for staff? Seeing none, would someone like to move a recommendation? Donnie? Thank you. If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report reads as follows: that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 149-151 Ontario Street North as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous, and it will proceed to council on December 11th. Item 4.3, notice of intention to designate 628 New Dundee Road under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-482. Jessica Vieira will provide a brief presentation and overview. Jessica.
Thank you. So next is the notice of intention to designate 628 New Dundee Road, located on the north side of New Dundee. This property is subject to an active planning application, which proposes the retention and relocation of the existing farmhouse to a new location on site and the construction of 11 blocks of new townhomes. As part of this application, a heritage impact assessment was submitted and the draft was presented to the committee for review on September 5th of this year. The HIA concluded that the property met the criteria for designation, and designation was made a condition of conditional approval of the site plan. At this time, the city is pursuing the designation of the property through the notice of intention to designate process. Should council choose to give its notice to designate, heritage permit applications will be submitted for any demolition and alterations to identified heritage attributes of the site, and the Heritage Kitchener Committee will be provided the opportunity to review and comment on such future applications. City staff have concluded that this property meets 4 of the 9 criteria for designation. We're having some, if you could skip to the next slide. Thank you. So the design and physical value of the property resides in the fact that it's an early and representative example of a dwelling constructed in the Gothic Revival cottage architectural style. It has historical value due to its association with themes important to the history and development of the city, including early agricultural practices and early settlement. Further, the property has the ability to yield understanding about a community, as the building demonstrates both the materials available to early settlers and the common construction methods that were used during the mid-19th century. Further, when compared to properties with other Gothic Revival cottage-style buildings, it demonstrates architectural trends that could be seen in the area at the time. And finally, its contextual value resides in the fact that the structure is currently in its original location, and though the setting of the property has changed and the building is proposed to be relocated, it will remain oriented towards New Dundee Road, which is the original settlement road that once bisected the lot, and therefore it retains a physical link to its surrounding. In staff's opinion, these are the criteria that is met, and that is why designation should be pursued. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I have a note that Vanessa Hicks from MHBC is in attendance to respond to questions from the committee. Thank you. Does the committee have any questions for Vanessa Hicks? Seeing none, does the committee have any questions for staff? No questions. Would someone move a recommendation? Chen. Drew blank there. Thank you. All right. If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation of the staff report is as follows: that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk will be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 628 New Dundee Road as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? That is unanimous, thank you, and it will be going to council on December 11th, 2023. Item 4.4, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2023-IV027, 90-92 Queen Street South, partial demolition with retention of facade and new construction of a 44-story residential tower, DSD 2023480. Jessica Vieira will provide a brief presentation and overview. And we also have David Gilbraith from UP Consulting and Jeff Atchison from SRN Architects will be able to answer any questions, but I ask that the committee withhold the questions until after the presentation. Jessica.
Sorry, through the chair. I'm thinking that we're going to put a pause on this agenda because we are still waiting for the applicant. We're moving through the items, I think, a bit quicker than anticipated, so he hasn't arrived quite yet. I'm wondering if we can move on to agenda item 6.1 and start from there.
Sorry, our next item up is a 15-minute recess for refreshments, but I think that since we're going through things quite quickly today, we can put this one off for a little bit. Thank you. So moving on. Item 6.1. Notice of intention to designate the front facade of 144-150 King Street West under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023467. Jessica Vera will provide a brief PowerPoint presentation and overview.
Thank you. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties with the clicker. Oh, there we go. That's the right slide. Okay, so to begin, the following NOIDs that we have form part of the Municipal Heritage Register review that we have been undertaking this year. Updated statements of significance for each's cultural heritage value were presented to Heritage Kitchener earlier in the year. The committee recommended pursuing designation for each of the NOIDs that are to follow. Property owners were contacted on May 23rd, 2023 during the initial undertaking, and again on August 25th, 2023 when designation was recommended for the following 12 properties. And property owners will be contacted a third time via a NOID letter following this meeting per standard procedures. Next slide, please. So the first one up is 144 to 150 King Street West, also known as the Weber Chambers, and located on the north side of King Street West between Yonge and Ontario Street. This property meets 7 of the 9 criteria for designation, and staff have been in receipt of a letter of support for the designation from the property owners. So this property has design, physical, historical, associative, and contextual value. Its design and physical value reside in the fact that it's a representative example of the classical revival architectural style in a commercial building. Further, it demonstrates a high degree of technical and scientific achievement, as it's likely the first in the city to be built with precast concrete. Its historical and associative value reside to the fact that it has connections to the theme of economic development in the downtown area, and it had multiple notable tenants, including the former Palladium restaurant. Finally, its contextual value resides in the fact that it maintains the commercial character of the surrounding area, and it is physically, functionally, visually, and historically linked to its surroundings. And that concludes the presentation for this property.
Thank you. Do any of the members of the committee have questions for staff? No. Would someone like to move a recommendation? Andrew? If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report reads as follows: that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 114-150 King Street West as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? That is unanimous, and it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. Moving on to item 6.2, notice of intention to designate 24 Cortland Avenue East under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-456. Victoria Groen will provide a brief presentation and overview. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item is the notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 24 Cortland Avenue East. This property is located on the north side of Cortland Avenue East between Queen Street South and Benton Street. The property at 24 Cortland Avenue East meets 5 out of the 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. The property has design physical value because of its vernacular Gothic Victorian architectural style and contribution to a collection of row houses, which is a unique housing typology within the city of Kitchener. The property has historical associative value because of its direct associations with builder Martin Nelson, after which the row houses are named, and its representation of industrial development. The property has contextual value because of its historic and visual link to the adjacent industrial buildings. Based on the heritage values identified, Heritage Planning staff is recommending designation of this property. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Victoria. Do any of the committee members have any questions for staff? Yes, Natalie.
Is the building owned by like one owner or property management, or are they individually owned units?
Through the chair, I believe each unit is owned individually by different property owners.
based on that, has there been any support from any of the owners so far for designation?
Through the chair, we have not received any correspondence from the property owners for this particular property.
Are there any further questions for staff? Seeing none, do we have a recommendation? Kelowna? If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report reads as follows: that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 24 Cortlandt Avenue East as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It is unanimous and it will be in front of council on December 11th, 2023. Item 6.3, notice of intention to designate 26 Cortlandt Avenue East under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-457. Victoria Groen will provide a brief presentation and overview. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. So the subject property, addressed as 26 Cortlandt Avenue East, is located on the north side of Cortlandt Avenue East between Queen Street South and Benton Street. The property meets 5 out of the 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. This property is part of the same row house block as the previous property that was just discussed, and the property has the same design, physical, historical, associative, and contextual value as 24 Cortlandt Avenue East. It should be noted that 24 Cortlandt Avenue East and 26 Cortlandt Avenue East are the only 2 remaining properties within this row house block that are not designated. The other properties are either designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act or form part of the Victoria Park Area Heritage Conservation District and designated under Part 5. Should the designation of 24 and 26 Cortlandt Avenue East be successful, this entire row house block will then have protections under the Ontario Heritage Act. So Heritage Planning staff is recommending designation of this property, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Do we have any questions for staff? Seeing none, would someone like to move a recommendation? Shannon? Thank you. If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 26 Cortlandt Avenue East as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It is unanimous and will go to council on December 11th, 2023. Item 6.4, notice of intention to designate 58 Queen Street South under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-458. Victoria Groen will provide a brief presentation and overview. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. The subject property at 58 Queen Street South is located on the west side of Queen Street South between King Street West and Charles Street East. The property at 58 Queen Street South meets 4 out of the 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. This property has design physical value because it is a representative example of the Renaissance Revival architectural style that is in good condition with intact elements. The property has historical associative value because of its direct associations with previous and current owners, including John Fennell, Carl N. Weber, and the Working Center. The property has contextual value because of its visual and historical links to its surroundings. Heritage Planning staff are recommending designation of this property, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Do members have any questions of staff? Seeing none, would someone like to move a recommendation? Andrew? This application, if it receives approval from the committee, will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation of the staff report is as follows: that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 58 Queen Street South as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It is unanimous, and will go to council on December 11th, 2023. Item 6.5, notice of intention to designate 66 Queen Street South under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-459. Victoria Groen will provide a brief presentation and overview. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. The subject property at 66 Queen Street South is located on the west side of Queen Street South between King Street West and Charles Street East. Much like the property discussed previously at 58 Queen Street South, the property at 66 Queen Street South meets 4 out of the 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. This property has design physical value because it is a representative example of the Renaissance Revival architectural style. The historical associative value of 66 Queen Street South is the same as 58 Queen Street South, save and except for additional associations with George Randall and William Roos, who were owners-operators of Randall and Roos Wholesale Grocers, which operated out of this building. The building's contextual value also lies in its visual and historical links to its surroundings. Based on the fact that the property meets 4 out of the 9 criteria for designation, Heritage Planning staff is recommending designation. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, would someone like to move a recommendation? Natalie? If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report reads that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 66 Queen Street South as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It is unanimous and will be to council on December 11th, 2023. Item 6.6, notice of intention to designate 73 Yonge Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-460. Victoria Groen will provide a brief presentation and overview. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. The subject property municipally addressed as 73 Yonge Street is located on the east side of Yonge Street between Weber Street West and Duke Street West. The property at 73 Yonge Street meets 8 out of the 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. The property has design physical value because of its Gothic architectural style and its craftsmanship. The property has historical associative value because of its contributions to Kitchener's history as well as its direct associations with architect Arthur William Holmes. The property has contextual value because it is physically, historically, functionally, and visually linked to its surroundings and is recognized as a landmark within the City of Kitchener. Based on the conclusions of this property meeting 8 out of the 9 criteria for designation, Heritage Planning staff is recommending designation. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, would someone like to make a recommendation? Andrew, thank you. If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report reads that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 73 Yonge Street as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It's unanimous and will go to council on December 11th, 2023. Item 6.7, notice of intention to designate 4 King Street East 1 Queen Street North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023479. Riedra, welcome. Riedra Chowdhury, the student planner, will provide a brief presentation and overview of this property. Riedra.
Thank you, Chair. It's Rida. I appreciate that. The subject property, municipally addressed as 4 King Street West / 1 Queen Street South, is situated on a 0.46 acre parcel of land located on the northeast corner of King Street East and Queen Street North. The property at 4 King Street East / 1 Queen Street North meets 5 out of the 9 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. The property has design physical value because it is representative of the Italianate architectural style, which contains many intact original elements. The property has historical and associative value because it is the oldest commercial building in the city and was originally owned by Louis Breithaupt, who was a prominent business owner and former mayor. The property has contextual value because it is physically, historically, functionally, and visually linked to its surroundings in the downtown commercial core. Heritage staff are recommending designation of this property. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rieta. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, do we have a recommendation? Donnie? Thank you. If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 4 King Street East, 1 Queen Street North as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It's unanimous, and will go to council on December 11th, 2023. Item 6.8, notice of intention to designate 2-22 Duke Street East under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023462. Jessica Vieira will provide a brief presentation and overview of the property. Jessica.
Thank you. 2-22 Duke Street East is located in the northeast quadrant where Duke Street East and Queen Street North intersect. The property meets 6 out of the 9 criteria for designation. Its design and physical value lie in the fact that it's a notable and unique example of the Art Deco architectural style, and it displays a high degree of craftsmanship through its many detailed architectural elements. It has historical and associative value due to its connection to themes of economic growth and development in the downtown area, as well as its direct association with the Breithaupt family, being originally owned and constructed by William Henry Breithaupt. And finally, it contributes to the commercial character of the area, and it maintains its historical and visual links. Due to meeting 6 out of the 9 criteria, it is recommended that designation be pursued.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Heard none. Anyone have a recommendation? No. Thank you. If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 2-22 Duke Street East as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It is unanimous and will be in front of council on December 11th, 2023. Item 6.9, notice of intention to designate 40 Chapel Hill Drive under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023463. Jessica Vieira will provide a brief presentation and overview. Jessica.
Thank you. 40 Chapel Hill Drive is located on the east side of Chapel Hill Drive between Carindale and Evanstone. The property meets 8 of the 9 criteria for designation. Its design and physical value lie in the fact that it's a representative example of the modern architectural style, and it demonstrates both craftsmanship and artistry through its careful and symbolic design, as well as its selection of materials. It has historical and associative value due to its association with the Carmel Church of New Jerusalem. It provides insights into the Carindale community, and further, it has connections to a prominent architect, that being a John Lingwood design. Finally, it has contextual value as it maintains the character of the church-centered community, is within an identified CHL, and it can be considered a landmark within the community. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? None? Would someone like to move a recommendation? Natalie? Sorry. Shannon, my mistake. If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. Recommendation in the report that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 40 Chapel Hill Drive as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? That is unanimous and will be going to council on December 11th, 2023. Item 610, notice of intention to designate 54-68 King Street West under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-464. Jessica Vieira will provide a brief presentation and overview of this property. Jessica.
Thank you. So the subject property is located in the northeast corner of the intersection formed by King Street West and Ontario Street North. It meets 8 of the 9 criteria for designation. Its cultural heritage value or interest lies in the fact that it has design and physical, historical associative, and contextual value. It's a unique expression of modernist architecture with classical and neoclassical motifs, and this blending of architectural styles, as well as the high-quality material used and the detailing within the building, all contribute to a high degree of craftsmanship. It has historical and associative value due to its relationship with banking institutions, most notably the Bank of Nova Scotia. It was further designed by a prominent architect within the community, that being Carl Ryder. Finally, it has contextual value as it maintains the commercial character of the area, and it's physically, functionally, visually, and historically linked to its surroundings. It's also within the city center district and the downtown CHL, and its distinct architectural style and its location on a prominent road makes this a landmark as well. Due to these considerations, it's staff recommendation that designation be pursued, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do the members have any questions for staff? Seeing none, would someone like to move a recommendation? Andrew? If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation of the staff report reads that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 54-68 King Street West as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It is unanimous, and it will be go to council on December 11th, 2023. Thank you. Item 611, notice of intention to designate 67 King Street East under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023-465. Jessica Vieira will provide a brief presentation and overview. Jessica.
Thank you. So the subject property is located on the south side of King Street East between Benton Street and Queen Street South. It meets 5 of the 9 criteria for designation. Staff did receive correspondence from the property owners. They had one point of question or clarification that they sought, or otherwise had no concerns about the designation. The cultural heritage significance or value of this property resides in its design or physical value, being a unique and representative example of the international architectural style. It also has historical and associative value due to its association with the Canada Permanent Trust Company, and was also designed by the Ryder and Hyman architectural firm. Finally, it has contextual value as it maintains the commercial character of the area, and it has physical, functional, visual, and historical links to its surrounding. It's also located within the downtown cultural heritage landscape. Due to these considerations, it's staff recommendation that designation be pursued, and that concludes this presentation.
Thank you. Are the members have any questions for staff? None. Seeing none, would someone like to move a recommendation? Donnie, thank you. If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. A recommendation of the staff report reads as follows: that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 67 King Street East as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It is unanimous, and it will be in front of council on December 11th, 2023. Item 612. Notice of intention to designate 70 Francis Street North under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, DSD 2023466. Jessica Vieira will provide a brief presentation and overview. Jessica.
Thank you. So the subject property is located on the northwest side of Francis Street North, and it meets 5 of the 9 criteria for designation. The property has design and physical value, as it's a representative example of the Queen Anne Revival architectural style. It has historical and associative value, being originally owned by Albert Ruby, who helped to establish H. Krug Furniture Company in partnership with Hartman Krug. It also has connection to the economic growth and development within the city, as the previous owner was a prominent businessman, and the furniture company which he helped establish helped the economic growth of the downtown. Finally, it has contextual value as it maintains its physical, historical, and visual link to the surrounding area. It contributes to the continuity and character of Francis Street North, and it's historically linked to the Krug Furniture Factory, which is located in proximity at 111 Aaron Street. Staff recommend pursuing designation due to these factors, and that concludes this presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, would someone like to move a recommendation? If this application receives approval from the committee, it will go to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report reads that pursuant to Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the clerk be directed to publish a notice of intention to designate the property municipally addressed as 70 Francis Street North as being of cultural heritage value or interest. All those in favor? It is unanimous, and will go to council on December 11th, 2023. So that takes us to item 613, status updates. Bill 23, the Municipal Heritage Register Review. The question to staff is, are there any updates on Bill 23 that you would like to share with the committee?
Thank you, Chair. So we did want to provide a brief summary of the work that's been completed up to this point as a result of our Municipal Heritage Register review. We have now taken 24 NOIDs to committee and council in 2023, which is a record-breaking number. I believe the number we've taken to this meeting alone is record-breaking as well. We anticipate the next round of updated statements of significance to be brought forward in January, and we're anticipating the next round of property assignments to do the field review to be issued. We're probably looking at March, sometime when the weather is warming up. And then just as a reminder, there is no meeting in December.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff from the committee on this item? There are none. Thank you. Now, should we return to item 4.4?
Yes, I was just going to suggest that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. So backing up to item 4.4, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2023-4027, 90-92 Queen Street South, partial demolition with retention of facade and new construction of a 44-story residential tower, DSD 2023480. Jessica Vieira will provide a brief presentation and overview. We also have David Gilbraith, UP Consulting, and Jeff Atchison, SRM. They will provide a presentation and are in attendance as well. So if we could hold off the questions from the committee until we hear from both staff and the applicant as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So this heritage permit application is for the property municipally addressed as 90-92 Queen Street South. This property does have a notice of intention to designate passed on it by council on September 25th, 2023, but it has not yet had a designating bylaw passed. The work proposed within this permit includes the partial demolition of the existing building as well as adjacent buildings and the construction of a 44-story residential tower. The new construction will incorporate the retained facade of the subject property into its podium, and it will also reconstruct the facades of the adjacent 96-108 Queen Street South buildings as part of the new podium as well. This proposed work is part of an active site plan application, and it included the completion of a heritage impact assessment, which was presented to committee on June 7th of this year. In reviewing the merits of this application, I would note the following. The HIA concluded that 90-92 Queen Street South meets the criteria for designation under Ontario Regulation 906, now amended by Ontario Regulation 56922, and it determined that the identified heritage attributes of the property were located on the front facade. As such, by retaining the facade, the heritage value or interest of this property could be conserved. The applicants have also worked with staff on the design of the building in order to direct visual attention to the heritage resource and maintain the character of the streetscape by reconstructing the adjoining buildings. Those adjoining buildings demonstrate an eclectic mix of architecture, which staff deemed to be important to the character of the street. The top portions of the podium were also lifted and set back for visual separation between the new construction and the retained heritage portion as well. In addition to the HIA, a number of other supporting documents and materials have been prepared and submitted. This includes a conservation plan, a temporary protection plan with a structural assessment and demolition and stabilization plan, a risk management plan with a pre-construction condition report and vibration monitoring report, a salvage and documentation plan, and finally a commemoration and interpretation plan. The intention of these documents are to provide a detailed plan on how the demolition and construction is to be conducted in a manner so as to protect and conserve the identified heritage resource throughout and beyond the duration of work. The methodologies proposed are appropriate, and the work is in accordance with our guiding framework for heritage conservation, including the 8 guiding principles in the conservation of historical properties and the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Galbraith from UP Consulting, and I'm here with Jeff Atchison from SRM Architecture. Thanks, Jessica, for your presentation. Very thorough. A lot of what I was going to talk about, she's already covered, so I will go through it pretty briefly. So the subject properties, consolidation of 1 to 3 Charles Street and 84 to 108 Queen Street South, and it's subject to an active site plan application. We've been working with Deeksha, urban design staff, and now Jessica to refine the concept, and we've been to the Heritage Committee twice previously, first with a draft of the HIA, and then with the recommendation for designation earlier this year. So as part of the Heritage Permit application materials, a number of draft studies have been prepared and submitted to the city. That includes the HIA, temporary protection plan, demo and stabilization plan, risk management plan, updated architectural drawings, and of course the application form and fees. Jeff, do you want to speak to the existing conditions? All right. Sure. The portion of the building that is subject to the active notice to designate is 90 to 92 Queen Street South, specifically the facade of this building, and here are some of the defining elements of the building itself. This slide shows the location of the portion of the facade that is going to be retained in its entirety here in the red box, and then the proposed mixed-use tower above. This image shows a rendering of how the heritage facade is going to be incorporated into the base of the building, and how the design elements of other portions of this stretch of Queen Street are going to be rebuilt and incorporated into the design. It's been an interesting project working through this with urban design staff, and we're very proud of how it's been incorporated and retained at the base of this building. And in addition to that, the feedback from the Heritage Committee from earlier this year to provide some more spatial separation from the active or base level of the development to the tower above. There's some additional relief in there. We think that's a very positive change. So we've reviewed the staff report for this permit application. We agree with the recommendations that are contained in there and the 8 conditions, which are basically final approval and review by staff for the documents I've previously discussed. And thank you for the opportunity to delegate tonight, and we're available for any questions you have.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions for the applicant? Hello.
So I noticed that in the literature that we were provided that there was some concern perhaps that there might be some contamination from the dry cleaning business. Do you have any idea of what extent that might involve and whether that would impact at all on the removal, like the removal would impact on the building itself?
That's a great question. So a record of site condition is required for the site given the historic use. I believe the intention is to retain that facade in place so the remediation can occur even with it still being present on the site. Jeff, I think that's my understanding is correct.
Yes, and the actual dry cleaning facility was in the rear of the building where the existing parking lot is for the majority of the life of the dry cleaning business. So the heritage facade shouldn't be in any way impacted by that.
Has the soil been tested to see the extent of the contamination, or?
That is being done. I don't know if that's been completed.
I think the phase 1 and phase
1,
2 have been completed, but the record of site condition is still being worked through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee for the applicant? Seeing none, are there any questions for the committee for staff? There are none. Thank you. Would someone like to make a recommendation? Alona. Thank you. If this application receives unanimous consent from the committee, it can be processed under delegated approval authority following the committee meeting. Otherwise, it will proceed to council on December 11th, 2023. The recommendation in the staff report, it's a little lengthy, so please bear with me. That pursuant to sections 32, 33, and 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Heritage Permit Application HPA 2023-4027 be approved to permit 1, the partial demolition of the existing Art Deco front facade, and 2, the new construction of a 44-story residential tower. On the subject property, municipally addressed as 90-92 Queen Street South, subject to the following conditions. A, that the final heritage impact assessment and conservation plan be submitted and approved by the Director of Planning prior to the issuance of a heritage permit. B, that a final temporary protection plan, including a demolition and stabilization plan and structural assessment report, be submitted to the satisfaction of the city's manager of development review and the city's heritage planner prior to the issuance of a heritage permit. C, that the final risk management plan, including the vibration monitoring plan, be submitted to the satisfaction of the city's manager of development review and the city's heritage planner prior to the issuance of a heritage permit. D, that a final documentation and salvage plan be submitted to the satisfaction of the city's manager of development review and the city's heritage planner prior to the issuance of a heritage permit. E, that a final commemoration and interpretation plan be submitted to the satisfaction of the city's manager of development review and the city's heritage planner prior to the issuance of a heritage permit. F, the final building elevations be submitted for review to the satisfaction of the city's heritage planner in consultation with the city's urban designer prior to the issuance of a heritage permit. G, that the final demolition permit be reviewed and heritage clearance provided by heritage planning staff prior to the issuance of the demolition permit. And H, that the final building permit be reviewed and heritage clearance be provided by heritage planning staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. All of those in favor? That is unanimous, and delegated authority means that it can receive approval from staff. Thank you. I think we're at item 7.1.
Yes, we are. Information items. Information items, which don't require discussion. They're just for information for the committee.
Sorry, I still couldn't hear.
We're at item 7.1, which is an information item and doesn't require discussion of the committee unless there is a motion to discuss.
So 7.1, there is no further information. Item 7.2, heritage permit application tracking. No further information. Well, the only other item that is left that we did not take up was our recess.
Yes, Chair, I may suggest that we instead adjourn the meeting and enjoy our recess refreshments following the meeting instead. Just before we wanted to end the meeting, we just wanted to share, we've been doing some end-of-year reflections on the progress that this committee has made, and we have to say, and we'd be remiss if we didn't share with you our absolute joy of what we've been able to do as a team together, especially over the past several months with the implementation of Bill 23 and the pressures and the challenge that's been put forward in front of staff team as well as this committee. We don't have a meeting in November, so we're doing our end-of-year reflection a little bit early. And it's not lost on us that, not everyone sees the effort behind the scenes when they see a meeting move along, and we see the collaborative trust that you have with staff and in enabling us to pass so many notices of intention to designate. But we are aware of your efforts, your site visits, your meeting, all of the reading, the reports that you have to review in order to be able to confidently vote on applications. And we just want to say that we very much appreciate that, and we know that as volunteers, your time is very valuable, and we would not want you to know, or we want you to know that we very much value that. This year we early on set out a goal to do notice of intention to designate of 80 properties on our heritage register, which seemed like an impossible task, and I'm happy to report that we are on pace to meet that target. We did 24 and a half years, so that leaves us 56 more for year 2. So it's going to be a busy year next year, but I know that based on our successes, everyone is up for the challenge, and we look forward to really creating a lasting legacy of cultural heritage that you've worked to protect for future generations. So you should be very proud, and we are very appreciative of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and we appreciate your efforts as well. I guess that's the last is the adjournment. Do we need a recommendation? Yes? Andrew, recommendation to adjourn? Thank you.